Here's a question that sounds simple until you actually think about it. How big was the Roman economy, or the Han Dynasty, or ancient Egypt? Because we throw numbers around all the time. Rome's GDP was $50 billion, and people nod along. But here's the problem. Nobody in Rome had any idea what GDP was. The concept did not exist. So where are these numbers coming from? And should you trust them at all? To answer that, first, we need to understand how we measure economies today. Because once you understand the modern method, the ancient version starts to look a lot more like an educated guess dressed up in an academic clothing. So, modern economies, how do we measure them? The main tool is GDP, Gross Domestic Product. It's the total monetary value of all goods and services produced in a country within a given year. And we calculate it in a few different ways, but the most common is simple. You basically add up all the consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Sounds clean, right? The problem is it only works because of paperwork. Modern states have tax records, corporate filings, census data, trade statistics, employment surveys, and banking data. GDP is essentially a giant aggregation of documented transactions. Every time money officially changes hands, it leaves a trace, and you could count the traces. Now strip all of that away. No income tax, no central bank, no corporate accounting, no standardized currency in many cases. What are you left with? That's basically the ancient world. So what do historians actually do? They use proxies. They are indirect evidences that let you infer economic activity even when no one was writing it down. And there are a handful of these that have become the standard toolkit of economic historians. The first one is shipwreck data. This one's clever. We've basically mapped out thousands of ancient shipwrecks across the Mediterranean, and the number of wrecks per century acts as a proxy for trade volume taking place. More ships sinking means more ships sailing means more commerce. The data basically peaks during the Roman imperial period and collapses in late antiquity. That tells you something real about economic momentum, even without a single balance sheet. The second one is lead pollution and ice cores. This sounds strange, but bear with me. Ancient metallurgy, especially silver and lead mining, releases pollution into the atmosphere. That pollution got trapped in Greenland ice cores, layer by layer, year by year. Spikes in atmospheric lead correlate with periods of intense mining and basically industrial activity. The Romans spike hard, the medieval period drops off a cliff, and the Black Death shows up as a sudden dip. You can literally read economic history in ice. Third is grain prices and wage records. These do exist in fragments, Egyptian papyri, Babylonian clay tablets, and Roman military pay records. Historians use these to reconstruct purchasing power and living standards. Basically, if a soldier's daily wage could buy a certain amount of wheat, you can compare that across centuries and regions. It's basically imprecise, but it's not nothing. Number 4, urban population estimates. Cities are expensive. They require agricultural surpluses to feed the non-farming populations that live there. They require trade networks. They require institutional coordination. Estimating city sizes from archaeological footprints, building density, water infrastructure, waste disposal, gives you a rough proxy for economic complexity. A city of 1 million people, which Rome almost was at its peak, tells you something about the productive capacity required to sustain the 1 million people living in Rome. Now here's where I want to push back on something, because this is where a lot of popular history gets sloppy. You'll sometimes see figures like Rome's GDP was equivalent to $50 billion in 1990 dollars. And people treat this like a solid fact, but it's not true. These estimates are built on assumption, stacked on assumption. You estimate population, then you estimate average caloric intake, then you estimate what percentage of production was above subsistence, then you apply a price conversion. Each step multiplies the uncertainty of the last. By the end, you have a number that sounds precise, but has an error margin so large you could drive an empire through it. The honest answer is we don't know ancient GDP figures. We know relative patterns. We know that the Roman economy was more integrated than what came after it in Western Europe for nearly 1,000 years. We know that Han China was producing silk at industrial scale, while Rome was still using handlooms for most textiles. We know Bronze Age palace economies in Mesopotamia were running sophisticated redistribution systems, basically proto-states managing labor and resources centrally. We can say bigger or smaller, more or less complex, expanding or contracting. What we cannot do is put a reliable dollar figure on it. And honestly, that's the more interesting story anyway, because what these proxies reveal isn't a number, it's a shape, the shape of Roman economic integration, stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia, collapsing not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, unevenly, region by region. The shape of Islamic trade networks in the 9th and 10th centuries, which were frankly more sophisticated than anything happening in contemporary Europe. The shape of an agricultural surplus in ancient Egypt, which fed not just its own population, but acted as the grain supply for half of the Mediterranean world at its peak. That's what ancient economic history actually is, not a spreadsheet, a shape, and learning to read that shape. From shipwrecks and ice cores and broken pottery and palace inventory lists is one of the more quietly remarkable things historians have figured out how to do. So next time someone quotes you an ancient GDP figure, ask them based on what? Because the answer to that question is usually more interesting than the number itself. Thank you for watching and good night.